Ollie the Bobcat. Earlier today, Ollie the Bobcat is on the loose in the nation's capital. And she's already got a Twitter account, if you can imagine that. AP. Team search for escaped Bobcat in D.C. neighborhoods. National Zoo officials say they're searching nearby neighborhoods for Ollie the Bobcat. And then magically, right after that, on Twitter, at Missing DC Bobcat, comes this. Catch me. Catch me if you can. Interesting. Ollie the Bobcat. Oh, I forgot to tell you. Ollie the Bobcat. I sent Ollie a ticket on United Flight 551 from D.C. to Sacramento's SMF. Ollie should be here momentarily.
I have come here to chew bubble gum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubble.
A plane has crashed into the World Trade Center in New York.
Trying to reconcile how Benghazi was not safe enough for the Federal Bureau of Investigation to go, but it was safe enough to leave a below-spec facility for our diplomats to stay in.
To the American people and to the world. The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Good morning, good day, good evening. Guess what? Show number 2 of the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's good to have you back. We're pouring, and boy, stuff has been pouring all over the place. Tonight, on BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, there will be serious drinking. There will be BZ corking off. Camshafts will in fact be thrown. The blood pressure will be 210/190, and trust me, just like White Mama suggested yesterday, level 3A ballistic vests are going to be handed out at the door. Earplugs, for the convenience of you, are on the bar. The jukebox is off, leftists are going insane, and guess what we're going to talk about tonight? Trump's immigration halt is in place. Someone got actually suggested for a SCOTUS nominee. We have that audio as well. Trump's immigration halt in place. Imagine that. You know what? Would it surprise you to know or to hear, to think that you're not being told but a fraction of that story? Also, we're going to try again at the bottom of the hour. We'll see, crossed fingers, crossed eyes, crossed toes, if Dave Milner, the unpleasant blind guy. We got disappointed last week because I couldn't make shite work. However, Sean last week set up everything, and I believe it's going to work this time. So at the bottom of the hour, Dave Milner is going to chat with us a little bit. And also we're going to talk about U.S. aid cut to countries who are refusing immigrant returns. That's H.R. 82. Quite frankly, I think that's a great and wonderful idea. Then also, we'll be introduced to BZ's Kettle 1 KC 135 refueling team. They come back. Then we're also going to talk about just who the hell is running for DNC chair. My. Do we have some interesting things to chat about tonight? But first, dang it, I almost forgot this. This is wonderful. You may or may not have heard this already. I picked it up. Have you ever listened to a gentleman, I bought his book. Have you ever listened to a gentleman by the name of Dr. Sebastian Gorka? He tends to appear on Fox News, Hannity, Tucker Carlson, all sorts of places. I'm sure he does other shows on NBC, CBS, ABC. I don't watch that. Guess what? Dr. Sebastian Gorka just got appointed Deputy Assistant to President Donald Trump today. I find that absolutely refreshing and absolutely wonderful. But there was another thing that occurred today. We had Donald Trump reveal back east just a few hours ago, as a matter of fact, that his nomination for his first Supreme Court appointment, his nomination to replace Antonin Scalia, is a guy that's very much sort of molded in the face of Antonin Scalia himself. It's a gentleman by the name of Neil Gorsuch. So Neil McGill Gorsuch, he's currently an American judge in the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit. This is wonderful. He's 49 years old. We'll be installing, if we can get him through, we'll be installing an individual who probably by the time everything is said and done, he'll be 50. But theoretically, he'll have at least 20, 25, maybe even 30 years on the bench. That's a wonderful thing. He's wonderfully educated. He clerked for, I believe he clerked for Kennedy, if I'm not mistaken. So that was an absolutely, absolutely wonderful thing. Well, guess what? He also is a rather humble individual. And if I'm not mistaken, here's what occurred at the White House.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. When Justice Scalia passed away suddenly last February, I made a promise to the American people. If I were elected president, I would find the very best judge in the country for the Supreme Court. I promised to select someone who respects our laws and is representative of our Constitution and who loves our Constitution, and someone who will interpret them as written. This may be the most transparent judicial selection process in history. Months ago, as a candidate, I publicly presented a list of brilliant and accomplished people to the American electorate and pledged to make my choice from among that list. Millions of voters said this was the single most important issue to them when they voted for me for president. I am a man of my word. I will do as I say, something that the American people have been asking for.
Stop. Absolutely. He is a man of his word. He's done more things in the first week Actually, he's done more things in the weeks leading up to his actual inauguration than most presidents I can think of. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm one of the ones that I was not a Trump guy, but I did say that eventually I'd vote for him because, number one, he wasn't Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, and number two, I could only hope that he would pull out someone for SCOTUS. Listen.
From Washington for a very, very long time. Today, thank you. Today I am keeping another promise to the American people by nominating Judge Neil Gorsuch of the United States Supreme Court to be of the United States Supreme Court. And I would like to ask Judge Gorsuch and his wonderful wife Louise to please step forward. Please, Louise, Judge. Here they come. Here they come.
I like the phone going off in the background.
So was that a surprise? Was it?
Stop. Here's what I think is going to happen. You realize that Trump flew two people at the very last second today. Gorsuch and another gentleman whose name escapes me right now. But Gorsuch won. My guess is this is going to be his nomination, his first nomination to replace Antonin Scalia. The other gentleman, again, whose name escapes me, what do you bet? He's next on the list.
I have always felt that after the defense of our nation, the most important decision a president of the United States can make is the appointment of a Supreme Court justice. Depending on their age, a justice can be active for 50 years, and his or her decisions can last a century or more and can often be permanent. I took the task of this nomination very seriously. I have selected an individual whose qualities define, really, and I mean closely define, what we're looking for. Judge Gorsuch has outstanding legal skills, a brilliant mind, tremendous discipline, and has earned bipartisan support. When he was nominated to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, he was confirmed by the Senate unanimously. Also, that's unanimous. Can you believe that nowadays with what's going on?
True.
Does that happen anymore? Does it happen? I think it's going to happen, maybe again. Also with us tonight is Maureen Scalia, a woman loved by her husband and deeply respected by all. I am so happy she is with us. Where is Maureen? Please stand up. Thank you, Maureen.
Frankly, I think that was an absolute honor that he invited her and put her right in front of the audience in honor of her husband who has passed. That was a wonderful thing for him to have done.
Thank you, Maureen. She is really the ultimate representative of the late, great Justice Antonin Scalia, whose image and genius was in my mind throughout the decision-making process. Not only are we looking at the writings of the nominee, and I studied them closely, but he is said to be among the finest and most brilliant, oftentimes, the writings of any judge for a long, long time. And his academic credentials, something very important to me, and that education has always been a priority, are as good as I have ever seen. He received his undergraduate degree from Columbia with honors. He then received his law degree from Harvard, also with honors, where he was a Truman Scholar. After Harvard, he received his doctorate at Oxford, where he attended as a Marshall Scholar, one of the top academic honors anywhere in the world. After law school, he clerked on the Supreme Court for both Justices Byron White and Anthony Kennedy. It is an extraordinary resume, as good as it gets. Judge Gorsuch was born and raised in Colorado and was taught the value of independence, hard work, and public service. While in law school, he demonstrated a commitment to helping the less fortunate. He worked in both Harvard Prison Legal Assistance Projects and Harvard Defenders Program. Brilliance being assured, I studied every aspect of his life. He could have had any job at any law firm for any amount of money. But what he wanted to do with his career was to be a judge, to write decisions, and to make an impact by upholding our laws and our Constitution. The qualifications of Judge Gorsuch are beyond dispute. He is the man of our country and a man who our country really needs and needs badly to ensure the rule of law and the rule of justice. I would like to thank Senate leadership. I only hope that both Democrats and Republicans can come together for once for the good of the country. Congratulations to you and your family. May God bless you. May God bless our glorious nation. Judge Gorsuch, the podium, sir, is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. President, thank you very much. Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, you and your team have shown me great courtesy in this process, and you've entrusted me with a most solemn assignment. Standing here in a house of history and acutely aware of my own imperfections, I pledge that if I am confirmed, I will do all my powers permit to be a faithful servant of the Constitution and laws of this great country.
Stop. He's going to serve the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. He believes in the rule of law, as opposed to other people who don't. This is going to be, folks, a gentleman who is a strict constructionist. He's going to stick to what the Constitution says. He's going to believe in the limits that the Constitution places and the Bill of Rights places on government. Those are called negative rights. Government, the Bill of Rights states what the government cannot do. It doesn't state what the government can do to you.
For the last decade, I've worked as a federal judge in a court that spans 6 western states, serving about 20% of the continental United States and about 18 million people. The men and women I've worked with at every level in our circuit are an inspiration to me. I've watched them fearlessly tending to the rule of law, enforcing the promises of our Constitution, and living out daily their judicial oaths to administer justice equally to rich and poor alike. Following the law as they find it, and without respect to their personal political beliefs. I think of them tonight. Of course, the Supreme Court's work is vital not just to a region of the country, but to the whole, vital to the protection of the people's liberties under law, and to the continuity of our Constitution, the greatest charter of human liberty the world has ever known. The towering judges that have served in this particular seat of the Supreme Court, including Antonin Scalia and Robert Jackson, are much in my mind at this moment. Justice Scalia was a lion of the law. Agree or disagree with him, all of his colleagues on the bench cherished his wisdom and his humor. And like them, I miss him. I began my legal career working for Byron White, the last Coloradan to serve on the Supreme Court, and the only justice to lead the NFL in rushing.
which is true. Byron Whizzer White was a running back in the NFL.
He was one of the smartest and most courageous men I've ever known. When Justice White retired, he gave me the chance to work for Justice Kennedy as well. Justice Kennedy was incredibly welcoming and gracious. And like Justice White, he taught me so much. I am forever grateful. And if you've ever met Judge David Sentel, you'll know just how lucky I was to land a clerkship with him right out of school. Thank you. These judges brought me up in the law. Truly, I would not be here without them. Today is as much their day as it is mine. In the balance of my professional life, I've had the privilege of working as a practicing lawyer and teacher. I've enjoyed wonderful colleagues whose support means so much to me at this moment, as it has year in and year out. Practicing in the trial work trenches of the law, I saw, too, that when we judges don our robes, it doesn't make us any smarter, but it does serve as a reminder of what's expected of us. Impartiality and independence, collegiality and courage. As this process now moves to the Senate, I look forward to speaking with members from both sides of the aisle, to answering their questions and to hearing their concerns. I consider the United States Senate the greatest deliberative body in the world, and I respect the important role the Constitution affords it in the confirmation of our judges. I respect, too, the fact that in our legal order, it is for Congress and not the courts to write new laws. It is the role of judges to apply, not alter, the work of the people's representatives.
Let that sink in for a second. It's SCOTUS who interprets the laws. They don't make the laws. That's why this is a stellar individual.
A judge who likes every outcome he reaches is very likely a bad judge, stretching for results he prefers rather than those the law demands. I am so thankful.
That's why the Democrats can't have anything to do with him. Are you listening to what he's saying? He's saying the exact same things they cannot stand.
Tonight for my family, my friends, and my faith. These are the things that keep me grounded at life's peaks and that sustain me in its valleys. To Louise, my incredible wife and companion of 20 years, my cherished daughters who are watching on TV, and all my family and friends, I cannot thank you enough for your love and for your prayers. I could not attempt this without you. Mr. President, I am honored and I am humbled. Thank you very much.
And basically at this point, they're walking out, people are applauding, etc. A relatively short speech, actually, for a Supreme Court nominee. But it was a wonderful speech. It's an excellent speech. It was exactly what I was hoping that Judge Gorsuch was going to say. He's going to be a strict constructionist. And that's a wonderful thing to know up front. It's also the worst possible thing that he could have said. But wait, there's more. You knew that the New York Times couldn't stop from saying something as terrible as it possibly could about this man. This you can tell just by listening to him. This is an excellent man. He's a humble man. He works hard. I don't know a thing about him. But the way people speak, how they speak, and what they say they represent, and what they're going to do, discloses a lot about them. So the New York Times weighs in directly after this. New York Times says, Neil Gorsuch, the nominee for a stolen seat. That's how they want to play it? Yeah, that's exactly how they want to play it. It's been almost a year since Senate Republicans took an empty Supreme Court seat hostage, discarding a constitutional duty that both parties have honored throughout American history and hobbling an entire branch of government for partisan gain. You'll really enjoy this. President Trump had a great opportunity to repair some of that damage by nominating a moderate candidate for the vacancy. Moderate. Define moderate. Well, guess what? The Democrats won't define moderate. Essentially what they've said, there's a representative from Oregon who has said today, it doesn't matter, it's immaterial who the GOP or President Trump puts up. Whoever it is, it could be God, it could be Jesus Christ, and he's not going to vote for him because of this, the stolen seat. They want a moderate candidate for the vacancy, which was created when Justice Antonin Scalia died last February. Instead, he chose Neil Gorsuch, a very conservative judge from the Federal Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, whose jurisprudence and writing style are often compared to those of Justice Scalia. Wait, you arseholes. That's the point. The GOP, for once, did what they could when they could. And Trump decided that he was going to do exactly what he said. This shocks the shite out of Democrats and leftists, anarchists, and the American media maggots. That's the stultifyingly evil thing about President Trump. He's done exactly what the hell he said he's going to do. The article goes on, if Judge Gorsuch is confirmed, the court will once again have a majority of justices appointed by Republican presidents, as it has for nearly half a century. That's what grates in their craw, right there. Essentially, with Gorsuch coming in to replace Scalia, the court's pretty much exactly where it was just before Justice Scalia passed away. Well, go back to your wheelhouse right now, if you will, and think about what's happened. Most of the cases that have passed through important cases, heady cases, incredibly important cases, have passed by what? 5-4. And who's been a breaker, tiebreaker many of the times? Justice Kennedy. Who's going to be leaving in the not too terribly distant future? My guess would be Justice Kennedy. So the article continues. For starters, that spells big trouble for public sector labor unions. Stop. Who just went over to the White House recently and had a wonderful meeting with Donald Trump? That's right, a host of union labor leaders who all voted for Hillary Rodham Clinton, and they're getting their arses in line with President Donald Trump. Apparently this writer has no sense of history, doesn't have access to the internet or a television. Environmental regulations and women's access to contraception. If Trump gets the chance to name another justice, the consequences could be much more dire. I've had enough of that fucktard. Enough of the New York Times. But guaranteed, now when we come back, we're up against a break right now, but guess what? When we come back, we're going to talk about some of this. Dave Milner, the unpleasant blind guy, is going to be coming in for my first live interview over Skype. Cross fingers. Dear God, please make it work. Thank you. Love, BZ.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Breaking news. According to the latest report coming out of SHR Media, a merchandise store to support both the Reaver of Common Sense and SHR Media has just been unleashed to the general public. Be forewarned that this site can be contagious and numerous items can be purchased to support the best news programming. Go to Reaver.one website and click on the store link to check out the merchandise.
Okay, Mark, you there?
Hello.
I'm Matt, a
I
student at
have.
Hillsdale
Someone
College.
has picked up,
Here's
but I have no
Hillsdale
audio
President
on my
Larry
end.
Arnn on the continuing relevance of the Constitution.
Okay.
Many argue today that the
I have
Constitution
that
is
someone has
outdated
picked up the
because it
line, but
addresses
there's no
problems
audio on my
peculiar
end.
to the 18th century. Some parts of the
Okay, let's
Constitution
see
do
here.
read rather quaintly. Consider the injunction against titles of nobility in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. But is that so outdated? The purpose of the injunction is to prevent the government granting special privileges to some for partisan reasons. This strikes at the
Okay,
heart
man.
of the
I'll
rule
do
of
my
law.
best here.
The crony capitalism so common today is
Hang
a place
on.
where the government bestows
Yes, we
favors
can all
and
hear
tax
you,
dollars
Agador.
on some businesses to give them
Okay,
a leg
good.
up over others. This is exactly the kind of thing the Constitution was meant to prohibit. The Constitution is not so outdated after all.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national
give
conversation
me
on
the
the
cue.
Constitution, go to constitutionminute.com.
Times are dark. The people misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation in confusion needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, High Plains Talk Radio, Live Rebooting Liberty, and YouTube for a unique brand of commentary on the unpleasant blind guide. Because truth is not always pleasant.
In a world controlled by corrupt politicians,
You got a business. You didn't build that.
a team of ordinary men emerge from the ashes to give voice to the voiceless and hope to the hopeless. Sackhead Sean.
Dude, I'm not saying capitalist, stupid, bro.
Sackhead Clint.
All good friends of ours usually show up drunk.
Also starring Sacco as the producer.
I'm a little bit drunk, cause I'm drinking.
They are the Sackheads Radio Show. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific on shrmedia.com.
Beware, the Jersey Takeover is here. Every Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can catch the Reverb Common Sense Show, hosted by Jersey Joe, right here on shrmedia.com and highplansdailynews.com. Only Jersey can deliver hell like no one else, so consider this your fair warning.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, live and direct from BZ Sierra Nevada Airy in occupied California, doing the job the American media maggots won't, featuring right thinking from a left brain, working without a net and under an assassination order. Here is the bloviating Zeppelin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back. Kata, welcome back. And so, I think we have things up and running. Do we have the auspicious Dave Milner on the other end?
Well, you've got this Dave Milner on the other end. How you doing this evening, Mark?
Hey, I'm doing very, very well, sir. And how about you? Now, you are way over on the far right coast, are you not?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm in the land that used to be full of hard-headed Yankee independence that became the soft-headed, gooey, nougaty center of progressivism on the East Coast, which is Burlington, Vermont. How the mighty have fallen, man. That's all I got to say.
Before, what I'd like to do, and I indicated it last week, is all the people that work here at SHR Media, and Dave, obviously, for the people in chat, they all know Dave. And for those who may tune in on a podcast and are not familiar with Dave, Dave has a wonderful show under the name The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And I believe you come out with a new show once every week, correct?
That's right, Mark, yeah. Saturdays at midnight Eastern, I come out with new shows, and I'm on from 1 to 2, Monday through Friday. So you can catch me those times on Spreaker.com. And once I put out new shows, they're always available there and at the SHR Media page on YouTube. So you can hear me there, and you can hear me on as a panelist on the English Defense League radio program, which is hosted by Jeff Mitchell, and my co-panelist is one of the best secret weapons in news, Jan Rennie. We are on at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Thursdays and Sundays.
We're going to get back to that, the EDL radio, English Defense League radio. A couple of questions for you initially before we get into the interview itself. What do you have any particular opinion or thoughts about Trump's nominating Neil Gorsuch?
Very nice nominee. If his record matches words, I think he's just the sort of thing we need. One of the things that you find, in organizations of any type, if you want them to continue, is that you have to have continuity, and the continuity that we need is almost lost. It's hanging by a very thin thread, and that is the continuity of the base self-rule, which is the basis for the entire concept of the constitutionally federated republic that is the United States of America. So it does my heart good to see Trump nominating a guy who not only seems to have those principles in mind and be ready to implement them, but who is also young. Obama did this twice, as we know. He put in young libs, and we have to counter that with people who, as Trump said, can possibly serve on the court for up to 50 years. I mean, who knows, especially with geriatric science being where it is now. So, I am very, as with the entire Trump presidency, I am now guardedly optimistic, which I have to say is a quantum leap above what I was feeling a month ago about government.
Yeah, and I have to be honest, Cruz was my guy. Like him or hate him, whatever it was. Trump was certainly not my guy. I have to judge Trump by this. It's gotten to the point where I have to judge him not necessarily by what he says, which is kind of a sad comment unto itself, but I always consider the alternate. I do always have the alternate in mind, but I have to go by what he is actually doing and what he's actually accomplishing. And I think he's accomplished quite a lot in his short time. And I think his choice, here's what I believe happened. Those two individuals came in. He interviewed both of them, and people were saying, well, why would you take both of your nominees, your top two candidates, and have them come into the White House at the same time? Well, possibly it was to confuse maybe the press corps, something like that. I suspect he wanted to tell them both what his plans were. And I believe his plans were Gorsuch number one, and the next pick, what he said to the other gentleman, and I should have looked his name up. I can't think of his name. I bet he told him, sir, guess what? You're number two. And I'm telling you right to your faces right now, you're my number one, you're my number two. That's what I believe happened.
That would be a great strategy. Have your pitcher out there that you want. Throwing the pitches, and have another guy warming up in the bullpen. That's if that is what happened, that is smart business strategy. I'm really not thinking that he got them both in a room and had them sit down at a conference table and give him their resume, and then he looked at one and said, "You're fired." I really don't think that happened. Although I have to tell you, Mark, that there's a part of me, just a small part of me, that wishes that once he knew that he had actually won, he would have looked at the camera and said, "Hillary Clinton," and pointed at it and said, "You're fired."
That's a little bit of what I call Schadenfreude.
Well,
I would agree.
Yeah.
Did you happen to hear about Dr. Sebastian Gorka, rather? Do you know anything about him? Because I've been listening to him for quite some time now.
No.
And he was appointed deputy assistant to Trump today. And if you're not familiar, Do you know anything about the CV of him?
Not a lot, except just little snippets of what I've seen on on Fox. My impressions of him are positive, and that's about all I know of him at the moment. I think he might possibly have been on some new mainstream media shows, things hosted by people on Blog Talk Radio and possibly even SHR. I'm not sure, but it sounds like a positive appointment.
Here's why. Sebastian Gorka has a PhD. He's a national security professional, and his specialty is, I guess, what they call irregular warfare. Mm-hmm. But his specialty is also counterinsurgency, and the emphasis on that is Islam.
Mm-hmm.
So he just got appointed there today. When he speaks, generally, he speaks about Islam, and he's very blunt about Islam. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I can only hope that that's one of the reasons that President Trump decided that he was going to pick that gentleman. Anyway, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful choice. Folks, if you haven't checked into Dr. Sebastian Gorka, and he's got a new book out that I bought, and of course, because of my strange brain, I can't remember what the book is, and I haven't started it yet, I have to admit. I may actually do something as silly as to try to contact him and see if he'll be equally silly to come on the radio show. I think he's a wonderful, wonderful pick. Anyway, back to you, sir. How long have you been? Have you been in radio for a while?
Well, that's very strange. I did a lot of calling into other shows, including the Dennis Miller Show, around the 2009-2010 period. Excuse me. And then all of this time, people kept telling me, you should do a show, you should do a show, you should do a show. And I finally pulled the trigger on that in 2013. And, so I'm going to have my 4th anniversary in about April.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, right around tax time. Isn't that awesome?
How fortuitous for you.
Yeah. So, no, I haven't. I mean, aside from, as I said, doing little call-ins on other people's shows, I've called Miller, I've called Dana Lash, I've called a few. And, yeah, that I kept getting moved towards doing this because I had things to say, and it reflected an amount of political experience that I had just from observing politics, from observing in a non-professional way sociology, and from my love of history. It all sort of came together, and all of that observation began with that incredible mess of a convention that the Democrats had in 1968. I grew up in a household where my father was a Kennedy Democrat, and it was just an eye opener for me to sit there and watch that coverage and watch the chaos that erupted from this thing. And there were other things too, Mark. Growing up, I grew up in a household where, well, it was a little bit more discipline applied really that needed to be, but the main message was if you step out of line, your rear end is going to be somewhat warmer. Let's put it that way.
Just like mine.
But the other thing I observed was that the one thing that made all of these adults that could warm my rear end hop, skip, jump around, do this and do that was this thing called government. And I was fascinated by this because as a child, I lived in a world ruled by adults. But who can tell the rulers what to do? Listening to parents and aunts and uncles and things saying, oh, I've got to fill out this form. I've got to go here and do this. I've got to go there and do that. This sounded like stuff they had to do. So what was this thing that was making the disciplinarians, that was a disciplinarian to the disciplinarians? And I listened. And I kept listening past 1968. And then of course, going to school, I got into a class with a teacher who was, frankly, doing something that I don't approve of now. But as a kid of, I'd say 12 years old was when I first got into a class with this guy. I was pretty naive, so I was just this little sponge, and suddenly the modes of political thought that I had that had been instilled from a Kennedy Democrat household began to be changed, because this guy was a conservative and he began talking about conservative principles, and it really shaped my mind, because it all just seemed to make so much common sense, whereas the stuff that was coming from the Democrats all seemed to be this, you'll love this term, pie in the sky, airy, kind of fluffy, wouldn't it be nice if this or that kind of thing. And yet the conservative...
Right. My Little Pony kind of thing.
Right, exactly. The conservative philosophies, though, seem to be a lot more about, let's get this done, and here's why. And I connected with that. And
I have to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
At 12 years old, what class were you in when you were sufficiently mature to be politically or becoming politically aware at the age of 12? Do you remember what class that was?
Well, I was a weird kid. And
because I have to tell you, at 12, all I was doing myself is just riding a bicycle and pooping my pants.
Well, I got to tell you, man, at the same time I was watching Batman in 1967 and 68, I was, what I was doing. I was listening to the adults, and in 1968, of course, there was that convention that the Democrats held. So it was very weird. I loved being a kid. I could talk classic cartoons with you all night long, but at the same time, power definitely fascinated me.
You were a hell of a lot more mature than I ever was at that age.
Well, in those respects, yes. In others, I was a regular kid. At 12, you know what? I'm trying to think about this, what class this was, and it might have been a class in American history, and I believe it probably was. Though don't I wouldn't take that to court, because I'd really have to look, and I'm not even sure how I would research that anymore. But that teacher was such an influence on me. He was enough of an influence on my brother, for instance, who was a year or two ahead of me, to where my brother joined the U.S. Air Force right out of high school. And he was an influence to a lot of us. But, yeah, his ideas, the ideas that he espoused, let's say, just crystallized in this young mind of this, a weird, nerdy kid. And I just realized that this stuff just made a lot of common sense. And I'm very proud, Mark, I got to tell you, very proud to have been a part of the Reagan Revolution. In fact, I was almost one of the Paul Revere's. I wanted Reagan to run for president in 1976. I was one of those guys. So you can imagine how I felt in 1980 when he won the election. Over the moon does not begin to describe the feeling.
So you actually became self-aware about your political machinations back at age 12. But if I'm listening to you correctly, it sounds like when Ronald Reagan came in, that's when sort of the fire got lighted under you then.
Oh, no. The fire got lit under me, really, at the age of 12, with the things that teacher was telling me. And Ronald Reagan, when he was running in 76 in the primaries, I remember listening to him and going, wow, I really, I appreciated Gerald Ford, that he had seen us through Watergate. I appreciated that. But Reagan had the kind of dynamic conservatism that just that I connected with because of what I'd been hearing in school. And just grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and almost made me want to march on. I mean, I really think that had Reagan run in 1976, I'm one of those people that thinks he could have beaten Carter. So yeah, that's basically it.
Can you imagine what would have occurred had Ronald Reagan actually run against Jimmy Carter at that time and beaten him? Oh. It stultifies the imagination. It's just absolutely astounding to think what potentially could have happened. On the other hand, we wouldn't have had him up until 1988.
Oh, well, yeah, and that's the point. That's the deal. During this last election, I was arguing with someone whose name I won't mention, but he's a good guy. And, we were talking about conservatism, and it came, and I was saying I really want a good conservative candidate to run, someone who's obviously conservative, like Cruz